Hi and welcome to the Subscribe Live, where you don't need to own it to enjoy it. We are in Berlin and we are hosting this session for the Disruptive Innovation Festival, an online festival of ideas, which this year asks questions about the 21st century economics. Here at Grover, we like to think about the future, and especially about the future of consumption. Our daily business is to make technology accessible to people by allowing them to subscribe to their favorite tech products monthly instead of buying them. And we are faced with a new generation of consumers.
And they want access rather than ownership.
On demand instead of long term.
They are happy to share.
I want the freedom to change my mind.
Everything is a service.
I want it just as long as I need it. If I don't need it, you can have it.
They want the world at their fingertips, and they don't want to waste any of it.
By 2030, you will own nothing. That is what the World Economic Forum suggests. All goods will have become services, and you will be happier. But what about now? My colleagues at Grover, Björn Becker, Head of Subscriptions, and Tom Cummings, Chief Marketing Officer, tried to find out, when talking about Björn's self-experiment of going all into the subscription economy. Welcome to the Subscribe Live.
All right, so Bjorn, the title of the talk is Stop Buying, Start Living. Yes. Why don't you tell us, to start off with, what you were buying, what you stopped buying, and how full is your life today?
I definitely, I think in the past I was really much buying like anyone else. I bought the latest iPhone when it came out, I bought the latest MacBook when it came out. I noticed that I actually had a lot of stuff in my house, and I think I just wanted to go lightweight and do just only what fits in the backpack. And I gave away everything that I owned at that moment, and all my clothes included, and my technology that I had available except for my phone, GoPro that I purchased specifically for the travel, and a computer. And I really noticed that by owning a lot less, it made me a lot more agile to travel around. So when I actually adopted that type of lifestyle, I became a bit more obsessed about like minimalism as a whole as well.
Would you consider yourself a modern consumer? A lot of the things that you're talking about, this drive towards minimalism, would you say that's true to who you are? How do you fit into the big picture?
I definitely think that I'm a new consumer when we would define it just by saying we want more access to things and more experience driven versus just like stacking up everything that I possibly can. And I noticed that not everything is a big experience enhancer as we might think. So would I be the new consumer? I definitely think to some extent, but if you would look at the consumer to say he wants to own totally nothing, it's still some things you might still want to have ownership to, but I think that's slightly disappearing step by step.
So maybe now's a good time for you to explain a little bit about the products that you subscribe to, what your experience was with them.
So I try to take more an holistic view about what are the products were that I subscribe to. So I really try to think about like what are all the things I do in my life. And that is from, of course, like you need a house, you need to have it furnished, it needs to be cleaned. I have clothes, it also needs to be cleaned, some shirts that need to be ironed, and I need food that needs to be coming back in my fridge, otherwise it would constantly go out for food. I want to learn something new as much as possible. I want to do something for my headspace, so to speak.
So you're kind of covering Maslow's hierarchy.
I like to do that also from like a goal-setting perspective on a personal level, but I try to do it quite similar on the subscription level. And I took it to quite extreme, I think. Like the ranges are from a lifelong learning platform, like something like Udacity, versus actually a subscription to underwear, which is super random. But now we're actually at the point that the house I live in is rented, the furniture that's in there is rented. We actually rented even a chef to cook for friends, which was very extreme. Food services that deliver the recipes and the ingredients. Technology, one of them is actually from Grover with the Google Home, which is like really straightforward thinking in trying these new gadgets. So Yeah, and also, of course, the typical Spotify. I think everybody has it these days. Netflix, everybody has that these days. Have Dropbox to have my file secure. So I could possibly not like fill more stuff into it, and also meditation app because I like to have a streak counter in there. But yeah, like basically anything we could find.
Pretty much everything you've subscribed to your entire life. So which of those services would be the thing that you couldn't give up? And was there something that you found that you wanted to subscribe to but couldn't?
One thing I couldn't subscribe to that I wanted is basically a clothing service and a coffee service. And there's coffee bean subscriptions, but I'm not so fussed by that. I just want to be able to walk into a coffee shop with my subscription card, any like sort of specialty coffee shop, and walk out and just like take that on a fixed subscription. I think that would be amazing.
You need your bean subscription and your barista subscription.
Yeah, I like to. Well, yeah, that would be a very complicated way to get the coffee, but yeah, would be possible. And one thing that I got really addicted to was the meditation. And it was primarily because of the streak counter that was there, and to some extent also Udacity with lifelong learning. From a practical perspective, I think it would be really difficult to give up the subscription of the house and the rental and the furniture, because then I would go somewhere else, either live on the street or whatever. So I think functionally that was difficult, but from a habit, I think it's meditation. Because for me, I was quite into meditation already, but I actually made sure I got in there every single day, and I got addicted to the streak, and the streak is now like 194 days or something.
So that's an interesting, you choose the term addicted. So when we think about like access economy, where there are no barriers to you getting anything before, previously you may have had financial barriers or psychological barriers or just plain friction that stopped you from getting the things you wanted. Now, how do you manage the addiction factors or the overload? Like, how do you process all of this stuff? Because stuff has a negative connotation in a consumerist sense. But when we move to access, what does having access to stuff mean?
I think there's like one of the examples is maybe if you have Spotify. Most people have something like Spotify, so I think it's easiest to frame is that first we bought like specific records of people or CDs that we really were fan of, and then like Steve Jobs came with the iTunes, and then we said, oh, like $9.99 or 99 cents. We became a bit more selective. And with Spotify now, it's like unlimited. There's so much choice that like you can browse for hours, but I still don't know what to look for. So I'm really happy with the recommendation engine to do it in our simple keywords. When I would say what made it actually more difficult for choice, I think it was the food service. So I subscribed to multiple food services, but what it created for me is that I had to create a lot more structure in my life to be able to actually prepare those meals. So normally, like when we have this like on-demand access and to things that whenever we want it, with food, at one point it goes bad, is that you're forced to do something with the food. Every week there's a new package coming, and it creates for me the stress of like, shit, I have like, there's for 2 people already for 2 meals, like for 1 package, and I ordered 2 of these services, so I had like a lot of food I had to cook.
Okay, so there's a cognitive overload of having too much access to too much stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of taking then a step back and looking at the overall market for subscription economy and circular offerings, where the broader trend is going, where maybe business opportunities lie, what makes a great subscription or circular service?
So I think there are 2 sides. I think you need to again compare what's, for example, with software and what is more either like hardware or physical goods, because I think with software, if I don't want it anymore, I can't click a button, cancel, and it's done, right? Like often I go back to a freemium version, still use some, and it doesn't hurt me much. Like with Evernote, the pain got so big not having it offline that I just had to pay for it, right? Same with Spotify, music offline, the pain is so high. Got off it. And I think they do it smart because they give you first free function that's quite wide, and they slowly reduce it so that you're forced to pay. With physical goods, it is, I think, a bit more challenging. And I think where the biggest gap is that the quick demand access, yes, no, I don't want it anymore, is not really there. Because if I get sent the physical goods and I want to change it, or I want to swap it, or I want something else instead, there's a lot of hassle. So I think the biggest opportunity is for companies when it comes to subscriptions with physical goods. How can you make it so frictionless as in the way software does it, the way an Evernote does it, or the way Spotify does it, or the way Netflix does it? Because it forces those companies to become even better in the experience and the value creation, instead of creating like the lock-in, like, oh, it's just super difficult to send stuff back. So I think that's where the opportunity lays. If you really want to improve the ability for us to create a circular economy in these things and reuse items, then we also need to make it easier to make this almost like dialogue happen from needs that people have.
You've stopped buying and you've started renting and started subscribing to things. How much pressure do you feel and see to always have access to the latest things? And how has that changed since your mode of consumption is no longer the purchase mechanism, but the get things on demand?
I think what happened for me is that I did notice that I became more aware when it's a subscription, when it's monthly, because when you buy it, it's sort of the pain up front, and then it's out of your pocket, and you think, okay, shitty purchase, right? That's sort of what you sometimes think. And then you get over it, and then that stuff happens. And I think with subscriptions, you're more reminded of it. And if you add a lot of subscriptions, like when I saw like the total amount of all the stuff that I was subscribing to, I was like, whoa, that's quite a bit. You become more aware of what you're doing.
Okay, so looking forward into the future then. You've been doing your test for 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. How do you see the subscribe life playing out on a personal level? Is it something you're going to continue doing? And if you were to project even further into the future, this sort of 10, 15-year time frame that we're looking at for the access economy to take over from a consumption purchase economy, where do you see the trends as you've experienced them going in the long run?
So for the first part, like, would I continue to do it? Yes. Like, I think for some of the things I was already subscribed for more than a year, some of these 2 years already. So that was interesting, and I think I really went all in with like everything for 3 or 4 weeks. But those were only like what I added to it for some of the stuff I was already experimenting. Like the underwear was kind of a funny thing that I just like wanted to sort of do. Not that I needed it necessarily, but I think that was fun. The renting of home, probably yes, because I like the flexibility of like jumping from one place to another. Just like sometimes for a fresh impression, or live in a different neighborhood, maybe here in Berlin or wherever, for example, we would grow as a company to go towards there. So I like that flexibility, and I think, oh shit, now I have another house, like now I need to rent it out, because that's what you then start doing most of the time, or you sell it. I think for most of the stuff I probably would keep. I probably need to review a little bit of some of the cost structure for some of the things I really don't need, but it was part of the experiment, how far I could go. Like, do I really need my entire life sending underwear and socks to me? No, probably not, right? Like, you would need to change it, of course, but it's not something that makes a lot of sense, because it's super expensive, needs to come from the US, and that just doesn't make sense. The cost benefit is just out of order. Looking towards the future, maybe at one point the governments will start to provide, next to basic income, basic subscriptions for people. So I can maybe see, if we really want to create like balance in the world and create more like equal opportunity, that means that people need to have the free access to the internet, but probably also free access to some basic technologies at a really affordable price point that now doesn't happen. It's now a fashion item to have a smartphone or a MacBook, while I think, you know, we can level the playing field and we can extend the lifetime of some of these products. People in other countries could really benefit from it, get access to the same technology that helped us progress forward a lot faster.
It's almost a utopian vision you're painting of the future, where we have access to anything we want at any point in time, and the next sort of 5-10 years of business innovation is figuring out how do we bridge that gap and get there.
we need to first figure out how to establish this. Because the same that we're replacing body parts or cells of or you 3D print things, how can we do this also with technology that is still usable, right? Because if we look at some technologies like VR and some of the drones, technology innovation goes really quick, price goes really quickly down, but you know, is the smartphone, the iPhone X or iPhone 8 really 10x better than the iPhone 6? No, I don't think so. I think people can still access the web, do the things that you need to do, build a business with it from your smartphone, become a YouTube phenomenon or whatever with gear that is already 3-4 years old. And I think we need to make sure that we create a system that we can use those things to give to people on a really affordable price.
Okay. I think that's a pretty good summary of our talk. How do we give people access to things at an affordable price and stop buying and start living? I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Officially.